Hello, welcome or welcome back. For those of you who don't yet know me, my name is Yenran. I am a first year physics student at Emmanuel College at the University of Cambridge, and I'm very excited today because we're going to be filming my by far most requested video, which seeks to answer the question, how do I get into Oxbridge? In this video, I plan on working through every aspect of the Oxbridge application process in detail. I'll start off by saying exactly what is going to happen and when, what you need to do, and then how you can do it best to maximise your chances of getting an offer. I've actually applied to Oxbridge twice. I first applied to Oxford to read mathematics, where I was unfortunately rejected post-interview. We had an event for the birth of the Yenran YouTube channel. The following year, I applied to Cambridge to read physics or physical natural sciences, and I was accepted. So, hoping to offer a unique insight on the differences between the Cambridge and the Oxford application processes, and I can also talk about what I think went different between getting rejected and then getting accepted. Obviously, since starting Cambridge, I have had the opportunity to speak to other students and particularly members of staff about the application process, but necessary disclaimer, everything I say in this video is my opinion and my responsibility only. It is not affiliated with either of the universities. That being said, I have bothered a lot of people, so hopefully this information is somewhat useful. Let's get into it. In the UK, you apply to all universities through a system called UCAS, which allows you to pick up to 5 options. However, you can only apply to Oxford or Cambridge, not both. The Oxbridge application deadline is earlier than standard. It is mid-October the year before you wish to start. Also, both universities run a collegiate system, and so you'll be asked to apply to a college within the university, or you can make an open application, in which case you'll get randomly assigned a college. I do plan on making another video about this, but in a simple model, pick the college where you would most like to live. For both universities, the application process as a whole is the same. You will firstly submit your UCAS, which includes your grades and qualifications, a reference from your teachers, and a 3-question essay response. This is a new measure for 2026 entry and onwards and seeks to replace what was previously the personal statement. You will then, depending on your subject, either sit an admissions test for the sciences, or for the arts and humanities, you may be asked to submit evidence of your previous work, such as a collection of essays or a portfolio. And finally, if you're selected, you will interview in December. Release dates for offers are both in January, with annoyingly the Oxford release date usually being a week before the Cambridge one. From this, there are 3 main components to your application: your 3-question response, your admissions test, and your interview. And I think those are in increasing order of importance. I achieved 11 grade 9s at GCSE and 5 A-star grades at A-level in maths, further maths, physics, computer science, and I did an EPQ on prime conjectures. Most Oxbridge humanities courses require A-star AA, and the sciences require A-star A-star A. If you don't have the grades, don't apply. There are no formal GCSE requirements, although it is expected that you'll have an average A-star grade, so a good mix of 7s, 8s, and 9s. Obviously, if you have a weaker set of GCSEs than this can be compensated for with stronger, more recent qualifications. The issue with A-level grades is that, firstly, a lot of private schools particularly inflate A-levels, and Oxbridge know this. That's not fair. And also, there are more people who apply with straight A-stars than they have places for, and so they need a way of differentiating between the people at the top. That's why they have the admissions tests, that's why they have the interviews. Similar things can be said for the teacher reference too, unless you've done something truly outstanding at school, which I had not. All of the references say so-and-so was a fabulous student, they're very bright, they very much deserve a place. Again, from an admissions point of view, there is no way of differentiating candidates through that. The only section on UCAS that's worth being bothered about, in my opinion, are the questions. They are, let me read them so I get them right. 1. Why do you want to study this course or subject? 2. How have your qualifications and studies helped you to prepare for this course? And 3. What else have you done to prepare outside of education, and why are these experiences helpful? 2026 is the first year of entry which will utilise this structure. It is replacing the previous personal statement. It's the same thing, they've just introduced 3 questions to help with your clarity. While I don't believe that you're going to get rejected or accepted based on your response here, this is your only opportunity before the interview to tell Oxbridge about yourself outside of the statistics. Now, I have interestingly heard an admissions tutor say that they don't read personal statements, but I know mine was read at both Oxford and Cambridge, and so it's not the be-all and end-all, but it is worth your time. The main thing here is that you need to prove to the admissions tutor that you are truly passionate about what you want to study. They first and foremost want someone who has academic potential, and that means being clear about what exactly you find interesting in the field and sufficiently evidencing that claim. Perhaps now you start to feel panicked as you think about how you can evidence that you love physics or whatever it may be. Don't overcomplicate it. The vast majority of my personal statement that got me accepted was evidenced simply by further reading. I applied with interest in astrophysics, particularly discovering exoplanets. I said I've read this, this, and this. This led me to this, then I discovered this, then I read this. I get the sense that often people feel pressure to do something impressive, like Physics Olympiad, And as someone that came from a state school, I don't really feel like those things are very accessible, and I think Oxbridge do know this. To them, it is much more exciting to see someone who's read a lot but seems genuinely curious and that passion comes through than someone who says, I ranked here in Physics Olympiad, unless you ranked first. With Oxbridge in mind, the only reason to put any extracurricular activities is essentially to prove that you are not a robot. Something that was highlighted to me by an admissions tutor, which I actually hadn't thought of, is that suppose you are considering two equally academically proficient candidates. You have one who is predicted 4A stars but studies for 18 hours a day, and you have another who is also predicted 4A stars but is a competitive swimmer and sings in a local choir. The second student is going to have much more capacity for the challenge because they just have more time. And as an admissions tutor, you want to admit people to university who are going to be happy there. And so for that reason, I would try, in response to the third question, to tie everything you can back to what you want to study. However, if you do have any long-standing or impressive hobbies, for example, I put down that I have a 3rd Dan black belt in Taekwondo and that I have a grade 8 piano distinction and I now play the church organ. You say that as it is and you don't say anything more. If it's not academic, they don't really care. Admissions test / essay / portfolio side of things, I can only comment on sitting a test because that's what I did. I sat the MAT mathematics admissions test the first time round, and then I sat the NSAA natural sciences admissions assessment, which has now become ESAT engineering and science admissions test. As far as I'm aware, you sit every admissions exam before you interview except STEP for Cambridge Maths, which is sat with your A-levels. Clickbait over, this is why I got rejected. I was invited to interview at Oxford, but I scored bang average 7, and I was below my college average for the admissions assessment, so I didn't get in, obviously. Look, I said getting into Oxbridge was simple, but I didn't say it was easy. Second time round, I also thought I bombed the NSAA, so I deleted the email before I could read my score. I keep having, like, nosebleeds. If there's, like, blood residue, just ignore. Anyway, my experience could be related to one of the rumoured big differences between Oxford and Cambridge admissions, which is that Oxford are said to consider candidates weighing the admissions test and the interview pretty equally, whereas Cambridge are said to admit based on interview, and then they use the admissions test or any other background work to contextualise your other statistics. I don't know whether this is true or not, but Oxford do interview considerably less people. In STEM, Oxford only interview about 1/3 of applicants, whereas Cambridge interview over half. The only advice for anybody who is taking an admissions test, or perhaps with any work that you need to submit before your interview, is practice till you keel over. There is no substitute for hard work. I think what makes the admissions assessment so difficult is that there is no time. Oxbridge know that they've given you far too many questions and they lure you in with a multiple choice exam, but the questions are hard and they are unfamiliar and they are written weirdly, and the only way to overcome any of those obstacles is by simply doing a lot of them. Say you are applying for physics at Cambridge, don't just do the ESAT past paper questions, do the Oxford physics test. Do both universities' computer science, engineering, maths tests, and do them under time pressure whenever you can. A lot of these things do fall into place when you ponder over them for an hour, but in the exam you have a mere few minutes, and so you need to be able to do them in a mere few minutes. A minor side tip here I'd say is when you're doing past papers, practice getting good at guessing. When I say a lot of the exams are multiple choice, I don't mean A, B, C, D. I mean they give you 10 options so that you can't guess your way in, or at least you'd have to be very lucky to. But you can often in 30 seconds or so really improve your odds of guessing right. For example, consider a maths question where you have to figure out the perimeter of a weird shape, and you do one side and it is a multiple of square root 2 in length. And out of the 10 options, only 4 are expressions which contain square root 2. Then you have very quickly increased your odds of guessing from 1 in 10 to 1 in 4. Now, obviously, knowing the answer 1 in 1 would be the best case situation, but it is very time intensive, and so if you're going to guess, at least do it well. I would say in my NSA, I probably guessed 50% of the test. So either I'm very lucky or this is really good advice. Okay, here's the killer. You've made it to the final hurdle and you're invited to interview. Interviews take place in early to mid-December, with invitations sometimes being sent out as late as a week before. I only got 9 days of notice for my Oxford interviews and I got a few weeks for Cambridge. And so it does unfortunately mean that you need to spend the limbo time of October and November preparing for interviews that you actually might not get. I personally had 3 interviews at Oxford. I had 2 at the college that I applied to, which was Keble, and 1 at another randomly allocated college, which was Lincoln. And this was over 3 consecutive days. And then at Cambridge, I had 2 interviews at my college, Emmanuel, on the same day with a 30-minute break in between them. I know at Cambridge for the arts and humanities, you can sometimes get 1 long interview instead of 2 with a break, but I think at Oxford, 3, 2 at your home college, 1 at a random college is the standard. All of my interviews both years were online due to the repercussions of COVID. However, I know especially this year, a lot of colleges took measures to try and get them in real life again, and hopefully they'll do so in the future. I think it is really lovely to stay the night, unless you interviewed at Emma this year and you got terrorised by me when I was born. In all of these cases, I had two interviewers. One asks you the questions and prompts you, and the other one takes notes, and then they switch between questions. Everything you've submitted up to this point, make sure that you are well versed on. In my first Oxford interview, I was asked about a book that I'd written about in my personal statement. I personally saw it as a conversation starter, trying to get me warmed up, but you don't want to be caught out at this point. My number one piece of advice for interview is to be yourself. At the time, it is a very stressful experience, and I do think a lot of the admissions process does weigh on it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be horrible. Hear me out here. One of the main advantages for me of reapplying and being a year older and a year more confident is that I feel like I performed far better in my Cambridge interview because I was more comfortable and more myself. Interviews are meant to be mock supervisions. When you come to Oxbridge, you'll have multiple supervision hours a week where you meet with someone from your college who's an expert in that field, and they will ask you questions that you do not know. That is what the interview is, that is what the supervision is, they are the same. Something that helped me a little bit with the nerves is thinking of your interviewers as people who love your subject just as much as you, but have simply been around a little bit longer. Their purpose as they sit across from you is to find students who have the potential to go far in a field that they love. The director of admissions for Visnatsky at Emma is my material science supervisor. That man is lovely. Every week I turn up to supervision, I've got half the question sheet wrong, he's asked me to explain things and I haven't got the faintest idea. Yeah, you feel stupid, but I love it. I get an hour of someone's time who is incredibly talented, and his only purpose then is to do questions with me and my partner. Sometimes I get them right, sometimes I get them wrong. It doesn't matter. I enjoy it because I feel like I've learned something. The interviewers are not interested in testing exactly what you know. If they wanted to ask you questions and for you to just immediately list off the right answers, they would have given you another admissions assessment. Only when they ask you a question that really makes you stop and think has the interview started. It is so important to emphasise that in the interview, the interviewer will ask you a question and then tell you that you're wrong. Here's what happens then. Everyone says it and it's true. Keep talking. Saying the wrong thing is definitely better than saying nothing, and talking is a skill that is easy to practice when you're solving problems as part of your preparation for interview. It's called an interview, but it should be more of a conversation, and the more that you say, the more chance you're giving yourself that the interviewer says something back to you. Even if they're telling you that you're wrong, that is still helpful feedback. At least then something is happening. I think it's also worth remembering that these interviewers are seeing sometimes up to 16, 20 candidates a day. And if every person that they ask questions to looks so miserable and so afraid, they're not going to have a good time either. Please at least pretend that you're enjoying it. In a worst case scenario, they'll ask you a question, and for 10 minutes, everything you say, they tell you is wrong, and at the end, they give up and they tell you the answer. Keep smiling. Say, wow, that's so interesting. Ask them, I suggested this earlier, can you explain why that wouldn't have worked? Crack a joke. The worst thing you can do is be boring, be upset, be defeated. There are so many big personalities in Cambridge, and I think it really does pay to be memorable. Even if they remember that you were dumb as hell but funny, that is better than being forgotten. When I was talking to interviewers, I sometimes got the sense that they just know whether someone's going to be successful at Cambridge or not. I have heard of people who got rejected, not because they weren't smart enough, but because it was clear from interviews that they wouldn't enjoy the Cambridge teaching style. And unfortunately, there's not much you can do about that other than turn up to interview, be yourself, and let them decide. Hopefully you will, on decision day, get an email that says congratulations, and you'll come to Oxbridge and you will have a lovely time. And sometimes you'll have a miserable time, but at least it'll be in a cute library. As a Oxbridge reject to acceptee, the only other thing I would say is that a lot of people want to go to Oxbridge, and unfortunately not a lot of people get in. I was one of them. It sucked. I was very miserable for a long time. I love Cambridge and I'm glad that I did reapply, but the system is far from reliable. Take it as an opportunity to challenge yourself, to dig deep into the subject that you love, and at the worst end of things, you'll be an Oxford reject like me, but you will be smarter than you would have been otherwise. As always, if you have any questions, comment them down below. I'm going to be pushing a lot of Oxbridge content this summer, so like this video, then subscribe, then bell notifications on. Then head to my Instagram, follow for some aesthetic Cambridge photos, TikTok for some slightly less aesthetic but still Cambridge related content. If you've sent me a message in the last 3 months, I'm sorry, I definitely didn't reply because I was going through hell. Maybe if it's urgent, message me again. Also, if it was on Instagram, all of my message requests got deleted because I took too long to reply to them. Sorry about that. Please don't message me on LinkedIn. I don't want to open that app ever. That's all. Good luck. Goodbye. Love you.